What is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here, and welcome to another installment of the Nebula Music Podcast. This is a show where I talk to some of today's most inspiring and influential musicians with the goal of understanding their mindset and diving in deep to understand what drives their passion. Today I'm joined by the very talented Patrick Sheehy. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right, Patrick. Patrick Sheehy is the lead singer of the band Walking on Cars, based out of Ireland. I mean, this band has shot up straight to success in a very short time, and after hearing their story straight from Patrick, I understood why they've been so successful so quickly, and it's because they're very true to their art form. I mean, they have a story of how they went away to a cabin in the middle of nowhere to write music for their first album. It took them 6 months. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of effort that went into creating their first musical effort. And after you hear that story, you start to understand why it is that they're so successful. And I was just blown away to understand the amount of passion that goes into their work. And I'm excited that I get a chance to share that story with you guys. Now, you guys know me, I could take a very long time complimenting some of my guests, but I would much rather them talk about themselves than you guys hear from me. So let's go ahead and dive into the conversation. All right, what is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here again, and thanks again so much for joining me on a brand new episode of the Nebula Music Podcast. I'm very excited because today I have someone that I've been looking forward to speaking with for a couple of days now. Their music is really cool, kind of new for me, to be honest with you, and I'm glad that I got introduced to this band. But before I go on a rant or just a random ramble on how great they are, I'm going to go ahead and let my man take it away. I have Mr. Patrick Sheehy, the lead singer of Walking on Cars, joining me today for a special episode. Patrick, how are you, man?
I'm very, very well. I'm very well.
Well, honestly, man, I want to say I'm glad that you have time to join me. Just to give you guys some context, he's sitting very cozy backstage in Munich. Even though it's very cold outside, he's agreed to talk with me for a couple of minutes. I get how it is, man. Sometimes you have to play in places where it's super cold, and sometimes that can affect your mood. Some people enjoy it. I personally don't enjoy the cold so much, but I'm glad that you're cozying up to be able to just talk about yourself and the music, man. So thank you.
No problem, no problem. I'm here backstage. The heater's on. It's all good.
I love it, man. Well, like I always do at the beginning of every episode, I love to give the opportunity for my guests just to sort of talk about themselves a little bit, just to let me know a little bit of where they're from and sort of how they got started with music. So, Patrick, why don't you go ahead and let us know a little bit about you, where you're from, and maybe, like I mentioned, maybe a little bit about how you got started with music.
Yeah. My name is Patrick Sheehy. I'm from Dingle. It's a small town on the southwest coast of Ireland, and it's a little music hub for the Irish music industry.
Really?
And I guess I'm very fortunate to be from such a place because there's mostly it's traditional music. Like when we were growing up, all the pubs would have traditional music playing in every night of the week. That's kind of what it was like. But in more recent years, about 12 years ago, this festival started in our hometown called the Other Voices Festival, and this allowed like the biggest stars from around the world to come to our little town and play in this little church for maybe 50 or 60 people. And that's when the fire kind of started for me. I'll just name you some of the artists that joined the festival. There was an Amy Winehouse, Elbow,
wow.
Ed Sheeran's played there. So it's pretty amazing. But back then, the big band that I fell in love with, they never got like super internationally huge, but they're an Irish band called Bell X1, and I know they've had a lot of syncs on US television. That was my beginning for my love of music.
Yeah.
When I was about a teenager. So that was kind of the beginning of it.
That's crazy. It was fascinating to me is a little backstory from me. I'm from Los Angeles, California. So I was kind of born and raised here in a big entertainment focused city, right? Almost from a very young age, you're kind of exposed to this environment that's all acting, TV, show business, that whole entire thing, right? So it's very normal to me. But I'm always fascinated when I hear about everybody else because almost everyone I come across, they're from somewhere else that isn't as big as Los Angeles, but they were little hubs of creativeness in their area. So you mentioned how I think it was Dingham, right? That's how it's pronounced? The town
Yes, correct.
Okay, perfect. I want to make sure I get it. That I get it right. Dingham is a bit of a musical hub. But what's fascinating to me is you were saying how a lot of these pubs, they had traditional Irish music, right? That was the norm before this festival sort of came into town. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in my experience, when a town is so prideful of their culture and, you know, kind of where they come from and all that, it can be a little tough to open their doors to something new, especially a festival that welcomes musics of all kinds. You know what I mean? And so I'm curious.
Yeah.
Did you feel like your town had that? Did they welcome it with open arms, or was it kind of like a weird transition from being strictly traditional to all of a sudden you're having Ed Sheeran and all these bunch of people just show up?
Yeah, it does make sense. It was kind of gradual in the sense that, so the festival is called the Other Voices Festival. So at the beginning, it was mainly set up to give exposure to artists that weren't that well known.
Yeah.
So you had it was mostly songwriters singing just with their acoustic guitars, and over the years it's developed into a much bigger thing. But I remember at the beginning it wasn't. Maybe I'm not going to say accepted is the right word, but it wasn't. People weren't that excited about it at the beginning.
Yeah.
And now, 12 years on, it's the best weekend of the year, and everybody in the town wants to get involved. And around, so you have your gig in the church. It's just over a weekend. But there's 50 pubs in Dingle. Dingle's a really small town, 2,000 people. 50 pubs is way too many pubs for any town.
That's like a pub for every 50 people or something like that.
Yeah, man, it's nuts. It's nuts. So during the day you'd have loads of bands playing in these pubs, and at night then you'd have the main act would be in the church. But yeah, it was definitely. It took a couple of years for the whole town to be like, okay, we're cool with this.
That's honestly the coolest thing that I can imagine. There's a couple of events that happen like that in the U.S. that I feel have changed certain environments in certain cities for the better, in my opinion, especially culturally wise. But for you, were you excited when this whole thing started happening, when you were young and you started seeing this brand new thing happening?
To be honest, I was a little naive about the whole thing. I didn't realize how impactful it would be on me, because I fell upon a ticket. Even when the weekend was happening, I wasn't going to go to any shows. I was just kind of being a teenager. I was fucking probably drinking up the park or whatever, and I had no intention of going. And then I fell upon a ticket. A friend had a ticket. My girlfriend had a ticket, and she said, look, do you want to go? I was like, yeah, sure, see what happens. And went and fell completely in love with the whole thing, and have been attending since.
Dude, that's fantastic. Well, let me ask you this thing, because I'm honestly genuinely curious how, you know, music careers and all that come to be. And it seems to me like this festival, like you were saying, had a huge turning point in your life. On average, without this new festival that's basically changed the little hub that you were part of, what was the traditional path for a musician back in the days? Or let me ask it this way. Had this festival not shown up, right, had it not changed a little bit of where you were from, what would be the traditional path that you would have taken had you chosen to pursue music at the time?
Even with that festival involved, I still didn't know how to make my way into the music industry. I was just a kid with a fucking head full of dreams, and I didn't know where to put that energy, you know. So I suppose it was just, it looked a little bit closer with that in my town, even though what they could actually do for me at that point was put me on the bill. But was that going to do much for me? It's hard to say. Yeah, I still look back to my early days as in a band, and I always think what can we do? How can we get ourselves out there? It was just totally baffling.
Yeah.
And because when you're an independent band and you want to get your music on the radio, because when we began it was strictly radio, and you had YouTube. There was no streaming.
Right.
So unless you're on the radio or you're getting shared by YouTube, you're kind of stuck in a corner. So we were very, very fortunate in the sense that we hired a publicist, and she put our tunes to a couple of local regional radio stations, and they fucking pushed and pushed and played them like all the time. And that's kind of when the world kind of said, okay, there's something going on here.
It's interesting because, and I'm glad that you guys did that. That was actually that was a very good move on your behalf. I think a lot of bands that I've come across in the U.S. at least, I'm not sure about any other country, but I can speak for the U.S. at least. People tend to get stuck quite a bit, and they never. I hate to say it this way, but a lot of people never take that chance. You know what I mean? They kind of just do what you were suggesting at first. You kind of just play around and see what would happen, and you try your best to get on the radio, but you don't really know how to do it. You guys took that chance and that lead to hire that publicist. Was that kind of your decision? Was the whole band aboard? Like, how did that happen? How did you guys come to be? And again, I'm asking this because from an independent mindset, right? When you're on the smaller scale stuff, it can be risky to make those choices. I mean, what do? Do you grab a manager? Do you grab a publicist? Do you go after the labels? You know what I mean? Like, what led you to that decision?
What do you do? So for us, what happened was we won a competition, and that gave us enough money to go into the studio. And as part of the competition, a publicist would release the songs you record in the studio. So we recorded 2 tracks, and then we did a couple of more gigs to pay for the other tracks. That we created like a 4-track EP at the time, and a couple of videos. We got a really, really awesome film crew on board, and they were kind of just starting up as well, and they were really eager to work on the tunes. And like the budget we had was nothing. Like I think we spent like 1,500 quid on our first video, and like you've got a car crash scene, you've got like it looks like a helicopter scene, you've got loads of shit. Like we fucking borrowed, we got help off everyone that we knew to make an awesome video, and our budget, like I say, was 1,500 quid, and it looks like you spent maybe 20 or 30 grand on it. We kind of went for it.
Damn, you got the best people on board. I mean, I don't know how much, I'm trying to figure out right now at the top of my head how much 1,500 quid would be in US dollars. But it doesn't seem like it would probably be about the same. Holy shit. And you managed to get this incredible product out of it. And let me ask you this, because I'm very curious. You seem like a very laid back dude. You seem pretty cool. You seem pretty just chill. Someone I'd love to grab a beer with at some point in my life. But the decisions that you made at that moment, you deciding that you were going to record that, you were going to basically go all in after you won that competition. That takes some sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but it takes a sort of type of mindset. You know what I mean? Like it takes someone to be kind of aggressive and really believe in what they're doing to go after it and put themselves in that situation and ask for help and ask for everybody. Again, kind of circling back, this isn't something that a lot of people do, even though to you it would seem like common sense, because I'm safe to assume that. I'm curious, is that something that's natural to you? Are you somebody who basically, when he believes that he's doing something right, you just go for it? Or did it take some convincing to realize, all right, maybe we do have a chance here. Let's all do it. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yeah. I think a big factor of our initial success was because we're from a small community that they kind of really got behind us. And if there was something we needed, we knew someone we could ask.
Yeah.
But like you say, when you have, obviously going into music, there's such a question mark over whether it's ever going to come to fruition, or are you ever going to get to tour, are you ever going to be successful, whatever that means. So there was lots of question marks, and I suppose there came a point where we kind of had to decide, were we going to do this a little bit and work a little bit, or were we going to go all in on this? And after we won that competition, then we went all in. We all quit our jobs, we quit college, and we buckled up. We rented a cottage in the middle of nowhere, back where we're from, and we had no internet, we had no phone coverage. We just had instruments and a nice warm fire, and that was kind of the beginning of a really special creative time for us. And most of our first record was written there. And,
wow.
Yeah, so it was an interesting one because the cottage we had was literally on the coast in this really small, kind of dingy old, like it was super old. It was moldy, it was freezing,
God.
but it was everything we needed at the time to kind of be what we needed to be. So I look back at that time and I think that was the fucking best time I've ever had in my life. Just the freedom of there was no pressure. Like if you went for a walk outside, you're walking along the road, looking at the sea, looking at the islands. Yeah, it was a very, very simple time. And I think when you listen to the music that we made, you can kind of hear it in that.
That sounds like every musician's, honestly, that sounds like every musician's dream vacation. That's crazy that you guys went out of your way to do that. And you know what's funny? I feel like I've seen something like that in various movies that I've seen, you know, about musicians and music. There's always a couple movies that will display a moment where a band goes away or an artist goes away and finds some sort of cottage somewhere, whether it's in the woods or by the beach, and then they come out of it transformed, essentially. That's basically what happens. I'm curious for you guys, can you maybe walk me through what it was like on a daily basis? Did you guys have a structure whatsoever? I mean, you guys cut yourself off from the world, which is probably the move to do, to be creative. But on a daily basis, was it your goal to record? Was it your goal to just write music or to just be a band together and see what happened?
Yeah, I think the goal was to be creative and make as much demos as we could, but without forcing it. Or so we'd show up 4 or 5 times a week. A few of us lived there, and a few of us kind of came in every day.
Yeah.
But on a daily basis, you get up, you'd have your cereal, and if the weather was nice, you'd walk outside, and you'd have a cigarette and take it all in. And then it was very, very simple. There was no TV, so there was a lot of books read. And the living area was literally just instruments. So if you weren't playing the guitar, you were trying to play some drums, or if you weren't playing the drums, you were trying to play a bit of something on the keys. So everyone was kind of playing everything. And it just happened very naturally, without too much pressure from ourselves or anyone on the outside. We had a manager, she was local, and she was happy for us just to do what we were doing.
I'm happy to hear that. Would you say that the ideas were flowing? Did they start flowing right away, or did they sort of escalate towards the end when you guys started realizing more or getting a better picture of what you guys actually wanted to do? Because that's something I would assume. You know, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that at the beginning it would be more about, you know, feeling it out, just experimenting with ideas, and then as the months went by, you started molding it, if that makes sense. I'm curious for you guys, did you feel like you had it right away, or you just kind of let it be, like you were saying?
No, it was definitely a natural progression. At the beginning, we even instrumentally, we approached it all wrong. Like we all played guitar, and there was 3 of us that played guitar in the band, so we were all playing the guitar. I was like, okay, hold on now a sec. Sonically, this makes no fucking sense. Why are we all playing the same fucking thing on the guitar? So I went on acoustic, one guy went on electric, and Paul picked up the bass, and that just straight away, okay, it's like, that's way better, straight away. Circle plays the keys, and that just gives it a nice little texture. And I suppose when we knew our proper formation, being creative and recording it felt much better because everybody had their own little space. Everyone knew their corner and knew what they needed to do to complement what was going on around them. So yeah, like I say, it was a process, but I think we've got the right team out now.
Yeah. Did you guys know, or did you book that cottage for 6 months in advance? Did you know it was going to take that long, or you guys just took it week by week?
So this was at a stage where we had just kind of started to take it serious. There was no label on board. There was no publishers. There was no hype around the group. We were just a group of friends just chilling out, and who had quit their jobs, who were just being creative. So it was just an easy time.
Yeah.
So what happened from there was we started to bring these songs to the live show, and that kind of gave us a good understanding of what was working live and what wasn't. Usually if there was a song that we were playing and you could tell from the energy of the crowd straight away if this song wasn't working or not.
Yeah.
So we went through a process of touring that we said, okay, that song's not working. This song is working. So you could tell which ones were latching and which ones weren't.
Now, let me ask you this real quick, if I may. For those songs that were working, did you see a pattern in terms of the songs that weren't working specifically? And I'm speaking out of experience here, coming from a musician, because I'm a drummer. And one of the artists that I used to play for a long time, a lot of the songs that we liked as a band, that we would put in a lot of work or a lot of musicality behind it, let's just describe it that way, weren't always the best crowd pleasers, but yet the more simplified, songs, were the crowd pleasers, which we ended up keeping in the long run, which was disappointing to us. But over time, we got used to it and we understood why. Do you feel like for you guys, was it a similar concept, or do you feel like every song was just different on its own and you didn't really have favorites or any of that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that you have a good point there. Like sometimes there's the songs you can write are a little bit more complex than the simpler pop songs, and obviously they are more enjoyable to play, but
way more
enjoyable to play, but they don't translate as well into the hearts of the people, and that's our job. So our job is to write a song to make people feel something, and if you can, that usually comes in such a simple form.
Yeah,
that usually comes like a sentence or two could just grab someone's heart, and then they're a fan for life. Whether you could play something like super complicated with 16 notes, syncopation, and all this, it's just too much info. And people can't deal with it. People can't deal with it, and yeah. So what I think I've learned is that something really honest and simple is the key. But then again, obviously there's some amazing fucking complicated shit out there.
Yeah.
But for us as a group, I think we enjoy listening to that kind of music rather than creating it.
Yeah.
Like we're super fans of Bon Iver, and what he's done in the last couple of years, and like that is just mind blowing. Like it's just insane, and it just gives me chills, and it's amazing. But I know I could never fucking do that. That's just he's on a different planet.
Well, maybe if you grabbed another cottage and spent like 5 years, you never fucking know.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, and I'm glad you bring that up, because I think that's always the eternal challenge for any creative artist, especially in the music scene, is that balance. Understanding your skill set first of all, but then trying to figure out what your message is. And for a lot of songwriters, and I play for a lot of songwriters, so I feel like I can relate a little bit. And your music is definitely more on the songwriter side, I would argue. The message is more for the audience, you know what I mean, as opposed to look how fast I can play, you know what I mean? And I think that's when you as an artist, you have to balance it out. You have to understand that you're like you were saying, you're here for the people. And what I'm curious about it, and maybe this is a very uneducated question, but I'm not very familiar with Irish music, and I'm just going to put it out there. I really am not. I want to be, but I really am not. Do you insert a lot of elements, or do you feel like you insert a lot of elements from what's culturally acceptable in Ireland into your music? And obviously while molding it to something new, because your music sounds very modern, but I feel like I can sense some cultural influences in there. And I'm just curious if maybe you can help me understand a little bit, if when you write, or when you and your band write, do you guys take into account some of the music that you maybe grew up on and then kind of put it in there?
Yeah, I think subconsciously we probably do. I don't think we've ever gone into a writing session saying we need to have traditional Irish music heard in this, or we need to have our culture heard in this. I think it's when you're so surrounded by it that you can't really. It's when you listen. I suppose what we've heard a lot about the first record is people say it sounds very Irish, and I listened to it, I was like, how does it sound Irish? Like there's no Irish.
I'm with you, man. I didn't get the whole Irish. Like I sense some things, but it didn't sound Irish, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and then other people think like it's totally the heart of Ireland is in it, and I suppose we wrote in Ireland, we've grown up in Ireland, culturally we're rooted in Ireland. There's a couple of elements that we have on the record that are specifically traditional.
Like what are some of those elements, if I can ask?
There's like an Irish chant in one of the pre-choruses of "Always Be With You." It's like a really old. It's a sample, but it's an old Gaelic melody, and it's just tickling in the background. And on the same track, we have a bodhrán, which is like a traditional Irish instrument for a little drum that you play with. It's one stick, and you just kind of hit it really fast. It's called a bodhrán. It's a fucking awesome instrument. But we have that on one. That's just one track. Generally, we haven't taken too much notice of it, but apparently our sound is quite Irish.
I love that.
So we're told.
I love it. And you know what? And that's something I have to, hats off to you, man, because if you yourself, and backtracking a little bit, I think what you were saying, how you don't necessarily go into a session saying, all right, I need to make this sound Irish. You know, I feel like that's, how do you even do that? You know, unless you're trying to play really traditional music, but because you allow yourself to express and get that creativity from who you are as an individual, right? And I think that's where the core of any successful band, artist, and music comes from, is being true. And I know it sounds cheesy, it sounds super corny, but hey, it's honestly true. I can't say it any better way. When you allow yourself to write with that honesty, without holding back, and when you're surrounded by peers that also write with that honesty, wherever you're from, that comes out. You know, you allow yourself to implement that, and you have managed to mesh it really well with something that I would consider unique, because your sound, it sounds modern. It sounds like music that I could hear anywhere. But when you describe it and you describe all those elements, I can absolutely hear where they come from. And I think that's the beauty, the balancing act that you are doing with Walking on Cars, is you're able to balance your culture with a modern take that anyone can enjoy. You know what I mean? And I think that's impressive.
Thanks. I'll take that. That's a nice. I'll take that all day long.
I say that because it's hard, man. And again, look, I'm from California, and I love being from California. It's my home. Everybody knows this. But growing up here, because you grow up in the show business, it's so common to come across tons and tons of people that are hustlers that want the success, but they refuse to ask themselves who they are, what makes them unique. You know what I mean? And they end up chasing what everybody else is chasing. And even though that's fair, I think we all do that. I always have to compliment those that I feel manage to balance it out, manage to, like I said, dig from their culture and apply it to something new, and essentially creating something brand new, a unique sound where people can recognize the elements and then everybody else can enjoy it. You know what I mean? It takes guts to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So I'm impressed.
Thank you.
I'm impressed. So, okay.
Yeah, we kind of...
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we kind of pride ourselves on trying to be as honest as we can with these songs, especially on the new record. We, because the success of the first record was pretty good, we definitely felt like this huge pressure on the second time around. And I just remember we went into that second album with a really, it was just the wrong approach, I guess. We kind of went in there to write a successful album and write hits rather than be honest and write from the core of us. So it took us like 6 months to realize that our approach was totally off. We had written like 30 or 40 songs and we scrapped them all.
Wow.
And we started again, and like I say, we got honest and we got real. And once we kind of shifted our approach, it all happened pretty swift. The second album came together really swiftly, but it took that moment of realization to just turn everything a little bit.
Oh yeah, and I have to say, guys, I mean, for those of you guys, some of the fans that are listening, the new album's called Colors, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's spelled Colours.
correct.
I love how you guys spelled it, and the album art is really cool. I've been listening to that album for the past couple of days. One of my favorite songs on that album is Too Emotional. I don't know why. It's everyone has a song that pops out to them, right? And I really like knowing that you guys were willing to reapproach something when you found out that you weren't doing it with the full honesty, which I tip my hat to you, because you could have easily just been like, well, we ran out of time and let's just put it out, but you had the guts to go back in there and do it the way that you felt was right. And I think that's what makes a successful artist. I can't say that enough, because anyone can have a one-hit album, right? And I think you guys have crossed a milestone. You guys have had a successful run with your first album. But then the question becomes, how do you remain relevant, or how do you remain an honest and successful artist? And I think the answer is right there, is going out of your way to be honest and be true with yourself. Obviously experimenting and trying new things, but the core of it all comes down to having the guts to do what's right to you. You know what I mean? And I'm curious, do you agree with that, or do you feel like it's something a little bit more different?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. We obviously wanted to explore new sounds and explore how much we've grown as musicians and songwriters. But at the beginning, like I say, we were totally focused up on the sound of things and how big things were sounding and sonically what everything was doing, rather than how the song was going to make people feel or how it was making us feel. And it was very apparent that these songs that we'd written at the beginning just weren't tangible. So they had no essence about them. They weren't walking on cars. They were just I don't know. I don't know what you call them.
It was something else.
We just couldn't stand behind them and say, look, this is us. We couldn't. So we scrapped them and we started again. And from then on, when I listen to the album, there's so many different emotions and different kind of vibes on the record. One minute you could be on the floor crying, and the next minute you could be dancing. And so there's I think that melancholic thing that we do is captured pretty well, but with an evolution of sound attached to it.
I love it. And that's why it's called Colors, because you get a whole bunch of different kinds. And I definitely got that vibe listening to it. And I was just about to ask you about what you wanted your fans to feel when they listen to this album. And I'm glad that you have different elements in there so that everyone can feel something different, because this album is a bit of a mixture of a lot of things. But the one thing that I can guarantee, coming from me, that you will get when listening to this album is that honesty. That honesty, I can sense it. And now that you explained it, I definitely am confident to say that there's a lot of passion and honesty behind this album. And I'm really glad that I got a chance to talk to you about it. I know you guys have a show to do, so I won't keep you for much longer. But at the end of every episode, I always love to end it with just kind of asking you, for all of these, young up and coming musicians that listen to the show, and maybe even some of your fans who want to do the same thing or something similar, pursue a similar career path that you are doing, what would be an advice or advice that you could give them? What would be one thing that they could be doing in order to achieve something similar to what you're doing right now?
I would say write an honest song and then do it again.
Yes,
because I think you can try and you can know people in the industry. You can have the best producers. You can have the labels on board. But if you don't have this song that you really feel is your own and that comes right from you, I don't think it's not gonna end, or it's not gonna capture people. I think you can write a hooky song without heart, and that'll be fine. But I think if you really want to get to people and for people to get to know you, I think an honest an honest song is the way to go.
It's the key, man. It's the key. Patrick, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. I know it's cold. You probably wanted to stay inside the whole time. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speaking with me. Are you guys going to be expanding your tour to the U.S. anytime soon?
At the minute, there is no talks of that, but I would fucking love that.
You should.
We've done some promo trips over to you guys on the last album campaign, so it wouldn't be unusual for us to come over. So I hope early next year. But so all I can say is keep an eye out, and everything will be on social media.
I'm going to keep an eye out, and if you do manage to come out here to the West Coast, allow me to buy you a beer. I'd love to do that. Okay. Game on. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Patrick. That was Patrick Sheehy of Walking on Cars. And listen, there's a million things I could say about this conversation. I just love their story. I love how they went away to a cabin and poured all of their energy into this album, and it shows. They've achieved great success because they're putting that much time and energy into what they believe in. And it's a reminder for me. It's a reminder for me that I am doing the right thing and that I'm pursuing my passions, but I want it to also be a reminder for you. No matter where you're at in your life, no matter how much time and energy you can spare for your passion, I think the lesson is if you are focusing it on what you want, you will get it at some point. You know, how much you can put in, I mean, that's kind of irrelevant in my opinion. I think everyone has different amount of times, and that's a conversation for another time, honestly. But I think the reality is for all of you listening to this episode, I know that you all have hopes and dreams and passions that you want to achieve. I think the lesson is to just really believe in the passion, because personally, and again, I don't want to go into another entire long conversation, but I think time is irrelevant when it comes to your passion. I don't think you need a certain amount of time to guarantee success. I think the idea is to really believe in a project, believe it so much that you're willing to put your time and energy into it. The amount of time and energy is really up for discussion, but that's the lesson I want to make sure all of you take away today. So I want to thank Patrick. I want to thank his management and everyone. Definitely check out their latest album, Colors. That's spelled Colours. That's right. They decided to be really cool about it and added U after the O. And frankly, like I said during the interview, I really adore this album. I love the first album. I adore this next one. I think there's so many cool elements. And I'm pretty sure that if you take a listen, you're going to want to put a lot of those songs on your playlists as well. So again, that's their album, Colors. You're going to love it. Definitely take some time to listen to it. And hey, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to come back and check some other ones, because this is my passion. This is what drives me. I love talking to influential musicians and try to understand what drives their passion. So come back anytime, check out any of the older episodes, and stay tuned because I have lots of great conversations coming your way.